My name is Alan Meyer. I'm 52 years old and live in Overland Park, Kansas. I've been a commercial airline pilot for almost 3 decades. I like things calm, precise, and exactly where I left them. That Tuesday started like any other. I woke up at 4:45 a.m. sharp, before the alarm. My body didn't need a reminder, it never did. I slipped quietly out of bed, careful not to disturb Nina. She slept on her side, one hand tucked under her chin, dark hair spread across the pillow like a photograph. Peaceful, untouched by the noise of the world. I padded down the hallway to the kitchen. The coffee maker blinked 4:48. 2 minutes early. I pressed the button, listened to the familiar hiss, and poured the first cup before the machine had finished. Routine. That was the foundation of everything. While the eggs cooked, I flipped through my flight roster on the tablet. Flight 219 to Atlanta, wheels up at 9:10 a.m., return leg by dinner. The schedule hadn't changed. Nothing had. I remember standing there, coffee in one hand, toast in the other, thinking this was a good life. Predictable. Safe. I'd earned that. Nina wandered in just after 6, bleary-eyed but beautiful in that silk robe she never admitted cost nearly $600. She didn't say much, she rarely did before her first espresso, but she kissed me on the cheek, murmured something about a client call at noon, then disappeared upstairs. Even that was part of the rhythm. I showered, shaved, and was at the airline headquarters by 7:30. That's where the pattern cracked. "Captain Meyer," the receptionist said as I scanned in. "Mr. Marshall asked to see you. Conference room B." I frowned. Marshall? The regional flight director? I hadn't spoken more than 3 words to him in the last year. Still, I nodded, thanked her, and walked to the conference wing. Maybe a policy update. Maybe some fleet transition news. That's what I told myself. He was already there when I arrived. Stiff as always, suit perfectly pressed, silver cufflinks winking under the fluorescent lights. He stood when I entered but didn't offer a handshake. "Alan, thanks for coming in." "Sure," I said, taking a seat. "Everything all right?" He gave a clipped smile. "Not the friendly kind, the kind you give before delivering bad news. I'll get to the point. Due to some ongoing budget and operational restructuring, we're grounding a few senior captains across the region. Effective immediately, your position's been dissolved." I stared at him, the words landing like broken glass on the table. "I'm sorry." "What?" "It's not personal. You've had an exemplary record. This isn't about performance. It's about cost and shifting demand. Your severance package will be emailed by end of day." I sat there, stunned. My evaluations were spotless. My safety record was pristine. I had seniority on most of the West Division. None of it mattered? "Is this permanent?" He nodded once. "Unfortunately, yes." And just like that, the floor dropped out. The routine shattered. The pilot grounded. The rest of the day passed like a blur. I remember standing in the parking lot, keys in hand, staring at the sky, not as a man about to fly into it, but one who had just been ejected from it completely. I had always believed that if I followed the rules, if I kept everything in order, nothing would fall apart. I was wrong. I didn't go straight home after the meeting with Marshall. I drove around for a while, no destination, just a loop of side roads through the south end of Overland Park. I kept thinking the world would start to spin differently now that I wasn't part of the skies anymore. But it didn't. It just kept going, like my job had never existed at all. By the time I pulled into the driveway, it was almost 4. Nina and Elliot wouldn't be home until 6:30. That gave me time. I needed it. I unloaded the groceries I'd picked up, rack of lamb, garlic, rosemary, heavy cream, eggs, sugar. I was going to make creme brulee from scratch, even bought one of those little torches on impulse. The plan was to ease into the conversation. Show love first, then break the news. That's what Nina always said, right? Presentation matters. I also stopped by that boutique florist on 87th and bought a ridiculous orchid arrangement, 4 feet tall, in a marble vase. Her favorite, purple and white. I decanted the Bordeaux around 5:30, poured myself a glass and left the rest to breathe. The lamb was resting under foil on the counter. The house smelled like a French bistro. Everything was perfect. At exactly 6:41 p.m., I heard the garage door open. Elliot came in first, still wearing his blazer from school, sneakers too white to be practical. He dropped his backpack and shouted, "Dad, something smells fancy." Nina followed behind him in stilettos and a cream-colored coat that probably cost more than I wanted to know. Her sunglasses were still on. She took them off slowly, scanning the kitchen. "What is all this?" I smiled. "Dinner. Your favorite." She looked at the lamb, then the flowers, then me. Her lips pressed into a line. "What's going on?" she asked, not in a curious way, more like she already suspected something rotten under all the rosemary. "Let's eat first," I said. "No," she said flatly, dropping her purse on the stool. "Why are you doing this?" Elliot had already slipped into the dining room. I heard the clink of plates. I hesitated. Then I said it. "I lost my job." She blinked, then tilted her head. What do you mean, lost it? Grounded? Laid off? Effective immediately. Silence. You? She said, voice rising. You got laid off? After all the years you've been there? I nodded. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the kitchen again like it had betrayed her. And you thought lamb and flowers would fix it? I thought we could talk about it calmly. She laughed, a sharp, empty sound. Calmly? Alan, do you realize what this means? Our insurance, our vacation plans, Elliot's camp, the property taxes on the lake house. Nina, I have savings. We'll adjust. Adjust? She scoffed. You mean spiral. You mean fall down the middle-class drain like every other washed-up sky chauffeur. The words hit me like a slap. She picked up the bouquet, the orchids I picked specifically because they meant resilience, and dropped them into the kitchen trash. Just like that. No hesitation. Flowers won't pay for the things we need. Alan. Elliot peeked in from the hallway, wide-eyed. Go upstairs, sweetheart, she snapped. He didn't move right away, just stared at the two of us. I couldn't tell if he was scared or just confused. Eventually, he turned and walked away. I turned back to Nina. I've flown over 200,000 passengers across the world without incident. I've paid for everything in this house. Everything. Don't you dare talk to me like I'm disposable. She opened the Bordeaux, poured herself a glass, and said without looking at me, well, you are now. Nina didn't speak to me for the rest of the night. After she tossed the flowers, she retreated upstairs and slammed the door, like I was the one who ruined the evening. I slept on the couch, not because she told me to, but because I didn't want to crawl into bed next to someone who looked at me like I was defective. Like a tool that broke the second it stopped performing. I stared at the ceiling for hours, listening to the tick of the clock in the kitchen. Somewhere upstairs, the soft hum of Nina's white noise machine buzzed through the floorboards. Even that annoyed me. Everything about her suddenly seemed off, too polished, too curated. Like a magazine spread that had been photoshopped beyond reality. Around 3 a.m., I remembered something she said a few months back. Something about consolidating our finances for convenience. I hadn't questioned it at the time. She always handled the bills. I was flying most weeks in and out of cities. I trusted her. But now? Now I couldn't stop thinking about the way she tossed those orchids, the ease of it. The way she called me a sky chauffeur, like I'd been nothing but a means to her end. By morning, something in me had changed. I didn't feel panicked. I didn't even feel sad. I felt something quieter, colder. I waited until Nina left for yoga, her Wednesday 10 a.m. class that always ran long. Elliot had already left for school. I sat at her desk in the home office, logged into our joint account. Then I opened the credit reports. 15 minutes later, I realized I hadn't known my wife at all. She had a second debit card I never knew about. A separate account at a different bank, opened 4 years ago under her maiden name. There were transfers between the accounts. Frequent ones. Some small, some thousands of dollars. One every couple weeks like clockwork. But it wasn't just that. She had 3 open loans in her name. 2 personal, 1 business. Business? We didn't own a business together. Nina was an interior designer, independent, by all accounts, but not incorporated. So who was funding what? I dug deeper. The loan statements listed consulting expenses and private services. There were monthly charges to something called ELM Strategies LLC. I searched the name. No website. Just a P.O. box in Scottsdale and a disconnected phone number. It didn't make sense. Until it did. I went back to the joint account and started cross-checking. Luxury furniture orders. Spa packages. Payments to private chauffeurs, fine dining, boutique clothing, none of which I remembered seeing in the house or hearing about. And yet, tens of thousands had been spent over the last year alone. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the screen. Consulting firm. Hidden accounts. A lifestyle I hadn't been part of. This wasn't about her managing bills while I worked. This was something else. Something Nina had gone out of her way to keep from me. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like her husband. I felt like a mark. It was after midnight when I heard them. The house was quiet, too quiet. Nina always turned on the dishwasher before bed, but it hadn't run that night. She was probably still mad, but that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the voices. I had been lying on the couch again, staring at the same dark spot on the ceiling, when I heard Elliot's door creak open. Then soft footsteps. Then whispering, low and urgent, near the hallway just outside the master bedroom. I turned off the TV screen and listened. Elliot's voice, small, but when do we get to live with my real dad? Silence. Then Nina, soon, baby. Just until the paperwork clears. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. My brain tried to reject it, like maybe I'd misheard. Maybe he meant visiting his real dad, a story Nina told to comfort him. Maybe real dad didn't mean what it sounded like. But then Nina whispered again. Just be patient, okay? We're almost there. But you can't say anything yet. Not until Marshall figures everything out. I sat up slowly, heartbeat thudding in my ears. Marshall. The name echoed in my head like a dropped coin in a canyon. Marshall, my former flight director. The man who grounded me. Cold. Professional. Barely knew me outside of brief conversations in conference rooms. And yet, now his name was being spoken in hushed tones by my wife? Elliot murmured something back, too quiet to hear. Then Nina, I know. I hate pretending too, but we're doing this the right way. I promise. I lay there frozen, the scratchy couch blanket bunched around my knees, the hallway shadows dancing across the floor like ghosts. My hands curled into fists. She was leaving me. Not just leaving, planning it. Coordinating it. And worse, she wasn't alone. She had help. Marshall. The pieces clicked together in slow motion. The sudden layoff. The consulting firm. The secret loans. The bizarre calm in her voice when she trashed my dinner and called me a washed-up pilot. She wasn't just angry, she had already moved on. She'd already written me out of the script. And Elliot? Was he mine? The question settled into my chest like a weight I couldn't shake. I remembered holding him when he was 2, when he used to grab my thumb with both hands like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world. The first time he called me Dad. His hand in mine as I taught him to ride his bike in the park. All of it, real. At least to me. But now? Now I didn't know what any of it meant. I lay back down, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling again. Only this time, I wasn't seeing a dark spot or a pattern in the plaster. I was seeing the shape of the truth. And it was uglier than I'd ever imagined. The next morning, I didn't make coffee. I didn't cook breakfast. I didn't check the news or scroll my phone like I usually did. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing, letting the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. By 9 a.m., I'd made up my mind. At 11:15 sharp, I stepped into the office of Maureen Chin, family law attorney, former federal litigator, and, according to the reviews, the kind of woman who didn't lose. Her office was tucked into a sleek brick building just outside downtown Kansas City. The lobby smelled like leather and order. Mr. Meyer, a young assistant said, standing at the door. She's ready for you. Maureen stood when I entered, extended a hand, firm grip, sharp eyes. She wore a tailored navy suit and had a streak of silver through her hair that made her look like she knew exactly how to destroy someone with 3 sentences and a statute. Have a seat, she said. Tell me everything. So I did. The job loss. The odd behavior. The dinner disaster. The whisper in the hallway. The word, Marshall. The possibility, no, the looming reality that Elliot might not be mine. I told her about the second bank account, the loans, the consulting firm that didn't exist. I didn't hold anything back. Maureen didn't take notes until I said Marshall's name. Then she clicked her pen and scribbled like she'd just heard a golden ticket fall out of my mouth. Marshall, as in Roger Marshall from Regional Ops? That's the one. She gave a low whistle. This might be bigger than just a divorce. I leaned forward. What do you mean? You may be looking at a case for intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraudulent concealment of assets, and possibly, if we prove collusion with your employer, a tortious interference claim. She paused. And if the boy isn't yours biologically? My jaw tightened. I didn't respond. Maureen's voice softened. We'll handle that too. Quietly. But it's best we get ahead of it. She explained the process. First, file for divorce. Then, begin a financial audit, trace every dollar Nina moved and when. Serve subpoenas for account records. In parallel, a paternity test. You'll need his toothbrush or a used swab. Something recent. And if he's not mine, we preserve evidence. Then we hit her with everything. Financial misconduct. Custody fraud. Emotional damage. If she's been taking money while planning to leave, and especially if your employer is involved, it opens the door for a coordinated civil suit. I let that settle for a minute. And what about Marshall? If he's been engaging in a romantic relationship with your wife while also being responsible for your termination, he's a walking liability. Especially if we can prove he acted with malice or prior knowledge. I exhaled slowly. You think we can win? Maureen smiled, not a warm one. A calculated one. We won't just win. We'll bury them. I left her office with a checklist in my jacket pocket and a quiet fire burning behind my ribs. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about strategy. And I was done playing defense. The DNA kit arrived 2 days later in a plain white envelope. I had gone with a private lab Maureen recommended. Discreet. Fast. No court orders. No questions. Just results. Swabbing Elliot's toothbrush felt like stealing from someone I loved. Which, I guess, is exactly what it was. I'd bought that blue and green brush myself. The one with the soft grip and Star Wars logo. I'd handed it to him at Walgreens like it was a small gift, a dumb little errand. Now I held it with gloved fingers, careful not to contaminate anything. The second swab was easy. Mine. One cheek, 15 seconds. I packaged it all up, sealed the evidence, and dropped it in a priority mailbox near the high school. I felt like a criminal. I also felt like a father. Or maybe just a man trying to find out if he still was one. The next week crawled. I kept busy on the outside, sent resumes to regional airlines, reconnected with an old friend who managed a small charter fleet, even sat in on a webinar about FAA consultant certifications. But none of it felt real. I was acting, smiling, pretending I was moving forward, while the part of me that mattered, the part that had once been a husband, a father, a provider, was crumbling quietly behind my eyes. Nina had no idea. She floated through the week as if nothing had changed. Still left for yoga. Still came home with shopping bags. Still sent Pinterest links for patio renovations to a shared inbox I'd stopped checking. If she noticed anything different, she didn't say. I kept my mask on. That's what Maureen said. Play dumb. Be patient. Let them keep writing the story while we collect the ending. On Thursday evening, the email arrived. Subject, paternity test results enclosed. I sat at my desk for 10 full minutes, just staring at the screen. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear. From finality. When I finally clicked it open, there were no paragraphs. No long preamble. Just one line in bold. Probability of paternity, 0%. I didn't move. Not right away. I didn't scream or cry or punch a hole in the drywall like some scene in a movie. I just leaned back in the chair, stared out the window, and let the silence stretch across the room like a tide coming in. I thought about that camping trip Elliot and I took last summer, just the two of us. Fishing rods. Canned chili. The night he asked if the stars ever move or if we just do. He was 10. I didn't have an answer. Now I did. He moved. I stood still. And now I wasn't even his dad. Except I was. I was the man who stayed. Who showed up. Who carried him when he scraped both knees and who held his hair when he puked up birthday cake. I was the man he called Dad every day for 10 years. So I didn't cry. I didn't fall apart. I sat there and let it harden into something else, something colder. Something useful. The mask was off now. And I finally knew who I was. Not a pilot. Not a husband. Not even a father in the legal sense. I was a man with nothing left to lose. And I was just getting started. By Monday morning, Mick Alvarez had what I needed. He called just after 7, his voice scratchy from too much coffee and not enough sleep. Got him, he said. I'll send you the package in 10. It's clear. No ambiguity. 10 minutes later, I opened the encrypted folder he'd sent. And there it was. Nina, my wife, draped over Marshall like a silk scarf. The photos were timestamped from Friday night, 9:17 p.m. to be exact. A boutique hotel near the Plaza District. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before. He was in business casual, leaning against the hood of a luxury SUV, grinning like the smug bastard he is. In one shot, Nina had her hand on his chest. In another, his hand was on the small of her back. The last one was from the passenger seat, a blurred, intimate moment. Nothing too graphic, but more than enough. It didn't feel like a punch. It felt like clarity. Cold and final. I forwarded the folder to Maureen with a short note. Confirmation. Proceed with full filings. She responded 2 minutes later. Received. Divorce petition and tort claims are ready. We'll hold until your go-ahead for service. Let her dig deeper. The more she lies, the better. I leaned back in the chair, exhaled slowly, and made my next move. I leased a loft apartment 10 minutes from Elliot's school. 1 bedroom, furnished, with a view of the parking lot and no frills. But it was mine. No ghosts. No carefully curated home full of deceit. Just walls, keys, and a door that locked from the inside. The landlord handed me the lease without a second thought. You're sure you only need it month to month? Won't be here long, I told him. Back at the house, I didn't say a word. I made dinner. I folded laundry. I listened as Nina talked about nothing, about spa renovations and new clients who just love her design aesthetic. I didn't interrupt. I didn't confront her. Because now I had what she didn't know I had, leverage. Mick texted me updates every other night. More photos. Another dinner with Marshall. A trip to a jewelry store. Once, a stay at a spa just outside town under a fake name, Nina Franklin. Franklin was her mother's maiden name. At night, I lay awake not with rage, but with patience. I had waited 20 years to build the life they tried to take from me. I could wait 20 more days to dismantle theirs. Maureen's last message said it all. Hold until we serve everything simultaneously: divorce, civil claims, financial fraud. We only get one shot at this. Let her think she's in control until she's not. I looked across the dinner table that night as Nina told Elliot he needed to sit straighter, chew quieter, act like a young man. I nodded, smiled. Let her play her game. I was already building the board. It all came together on a Tuesday. Maureen called me that morning. Everything's ready, she said. I've coordinated the process servers and filed the lawsuits. Today's the day. I didn't hesitate. Let's do it. The ambush had to be public, visible, humiliating, undeniable. Maureen's idea, not mine. She said the more eyes on it, the faster they'd crumble. So we picked the one place they thought they were untouchable, Marshall's office at Regional HQ. I wore my old pilot uniform. Pressed it myself. I hadn't touched it in weeks, But the moment I slipped it on, it felt like armor. Not for nostalgia, for war. I brought 2 private security officers with me, both ex-military, licensed and discreet. Mick Alvarez vouched for them. They weren't there to intimidate, just to ensure I wouldn't be removed before we were done. I wasn't taking any chances. Before we headed in, I sent one last text. To Terry Lane. You still want a piece of Marshall? Meet me at HQ at 3 o'clock. Conference wing. Bring backup. Terry was a fellow pilot. He'd been let go from the company 6 months earlier under suspicious circumstances, a vague realignment. We weren't close, but I'd heard the rumors. His wife had left him for someone at the top. Same story, different faces. Turns out that someone was Marshall. He replied in one word. Terry, hell yes. We pulled into the HQ lot at 2:52. I saw Nina's Lexus already parked. She was dressed for a meeting, heels, lipstick, coat draped over her shoulders like she was on the cover of a business magazine. I knew that look. She thought she was about to seal a deal. At 3 o'clock sharp, we walked through the sliding glass doors. Reception tried to stop us. I flashed my retired company badge and said, I'm here for a personal meeting with Mr. Marshall. He's expecting us. She blinked, uncertain, but before she could call security, we were already down the hall. I heard Marshall's voice through the frosted glass of conference room C. Nina's laugh followed. Light, performative. Practiced. Terry met us at the door. He looked worse than I remembered, tired, sunken eyes, but sharp in that way men get when they've got nothing left to lose. You sure you want to do this? I asked. He cracked his knuckles. Been dreaming about it. We entered together. Marshall was mid-sentence, gesturing at a chart on the wall. Nina sat beside him, legs crossed, tablet in hand, smiling like the queen of the runway. When she saw us, her smile dropped like a brick. Alan, she said, half standing. Marshall's face went pale. What the hell is this? I stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the conference table. This is notice of a civil lawsuit. Financial fraud. Emotional distress. Intentional infliction of harm. Also, your girlfriend's divorce paperwork. Nina froze. What are you talking about? Terry stepped up beside me. And this is notice of a lawsuit on behalf of a second party. Same guy. Different wife. Marshall's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Maureen's courier entered next, flanked by one of the security guards. He handed Marshall a sealed envelope and turned to Nina. Mrs. Meyer? You've been served. Nina looked down at the envelope like it was ticking. You're not serious. I met her eyes. You said I was a washed-up sky chauffeur. Let's see what your golden boy can fly you through now. People had started to gather in the hall. Employees, admins, managers. Phones were recording. The perfect audience. Terry stepped forward. You remember my wife, right, Marshall? Red hair? Marketing? Ring a bell? Marshall tried to speak, but all that came out was a weak, this is inappropriate. I cut in. So was sleeping with 2 married women and firing the husbands who trusted you. I turned to Nina. You wanted power? You wanted to run things? Good. Now you get to run damage control. Then I looked at Marshall one last time. You picked the wrong man to betray. And with that, I walked out, head high, paper served, truth exposed. The door shut behind me with a satisfying click. The storm had hit, and I was the one who brought it. The chaos didn't end when I walked out that door. It only escalated. Marshall tried to take control. That part was almost comical. The moment I left, he came storming out into the hallway, barking for security like he still ran the building. But my private guards weren't under his thumb, and neither were the people watching from behind glass doors and phone screens. Terry was right behind him, voice booming. You want to play the victim now, Roger? After screwing over half this building? That stopped everything. People in the hallway froze. Several stepped out of offices. Phones were still recording. I could see it all through the glass as I waited just outside with Mick. Inside, Nina grabbed Marshall's sleeve, hissing something sharp and desperate. She was shaking now, not the angry kind, but the unraveling kind. The what do I do now kind. Marshall turned back toward the room, trying to salvage whatever control he thought he had. We'll be releasing a formal statement regarding this disruption. But Terry cut him off with a shove. Marshall stumbled back, hit the wall behind the conference table. Security flinched, but I had already warned my guys not to intervene unless it got violent. This wasn't about stopping the show. It was about letting it play out. You think you can ruin people's lives and walk away clean? Terry shouted. My marriage? My job? You think I'm scared of you now? Marshall straightened his jacket and shot a look toward the HR director, who had just arrived at the door. But she didn't move. She just stood there, arms crossed, watching with narrowed eyes. That's when I walked back in. Calm. Measured. Let's clear something up, I said. I'm not just some angry ex-employee. I was fired under false pretenses while the man responsible was sleeping with my wife. The same man who's apparently had a habit of doing this to other pilots and their families. I turned to face everyone who had gathered. This isn't a private issue anymore. This is systemic. Nina stood frozen by the table, mascara smudged, the same tablet still clutched in her hand. Alan, please. I didn't even look at her. I opened a folder and held up a document. DNA test, I said. 0% probability. Elliot isn't biologically mine. Gasps rippled down the hallway. Marshall's jaw clenched. You don't need to do this. You already did, I said. Then I turned to Nina. You lied to me. For over a decade. You let me raise a son that wasn't mine, fund your life, cover your lies, and for what? So you could sneak around with the man who tanked my career. Terry was still seething, but he let me take the floor. I looked at the HR director. Check your security logs. This wasn't the first time she's been in and out of this building after hours. There are emails, payments, overlapping travel records. You'll find it all. Marshall finally broke. You're finished, Alan. You think anyone's going to believe you after this circus? I smiled. They don't have to believe me. They'll believe the court filings, the footage, the statements from other families you did this to. And most importantly, they'll believe your silence. Nina stepped forward, voice trembling. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. I was scared. No, I said, voice low. You were selfish. You were calculating. And now you're exposed. She started crying then, not the kind that earns sympathy, but the kind that comes when someone realizes the house of cards they built just collapsed in front of an audience. I stepped aside and let Terry finish what I started. You're done, Roger, he said. You and the queen you rode in on. And with that, we left them standing there surrounded, speechless, and ruined. The glass tower had cracked. And now it was coming down. It's been 6 months since the ambush. Since that Tuesday, everything has changed for them, mostly. For me, it's been a slow rebuild. No glamour, no dramatic triumphs. Just solid, honest work. And peace. Marshall resigned within 2 weeks. No press release, no farewell party. The board didn't want a scandal, but they couldn't ignore the footage, the lawsuits, or the quiet murmurs from the other pilots. Turns out, mine and Terry's cases weren't isolated. HR opened a full investigation. From what I heard, at least 3 other families had stories like ours. He's not working in aviation anymore. Nina's been quiet. At first, she tried to fight, filed a motion for joint assets, tried to argue for marital lifestyle continuation. Maureen shut that down fast. The evidence was airtight: financial deception, infidelity, and child-related fraud. The court ordered her to repay a large portion of what she'd siphoned from our accounts. And, in a move I didn't expect, ruled she'd committed intentional misrepresentation related to Elliot's paternity. In simpler terms, she lied, and it cost her. The judge also made it clear that although I wasn't legally required to continue supporting Elliot, I had every right to remain involved if I chose. That was the hardest part. Elliot didn't understand any of it. He knew something had happened, but he didn't see the wires beneath the surface. To him, I was just gone. I didn't want to abandon him. I never wanted that. But I also couldn't stay in a house built on lies. So I compromised. I arranged for him to continue in the same school, with therapy sessions twice a month. I made sure his college fund, the one I started years ago, remained untouched under my supervision. I didn't tell him the whole truth. Not yet. Maybe someday. We meet for lunch twice a month. Burgers, mostly. Sometimes we don't talk much. Other times he asks quiet questions he doesn't quite know how to word. Do you think I look like you? Or do you miss flying? I always answer honestly, at least the parts he's ready for. As for me, Terry and I started a consulting firm. Small time at first, helping regional pilots navigate contract disputes, wrongful terminations, and union matters. We called it Flightline Advisory. The irony of 2 grounded men helping others take off isn't lost on either of us. But the work is good, fulfilling. No suits trying to cut corners, no wives draining bank accounts behind your back. Just us, doing right by people who got steamrolled like we did. The funny thing is, I thought losing my job would be the worst part. Turns out, that was just the beginning. The real loss was trusting the wrong person for too long. Letting someone convince me I had control, when really, I was just another piece in their game. But now, I'm out of the game. And finally, I'm flying on my own terms. No lies. No passengers. Just me. And forward.